people had already went out and said things about getting rid of George Santos before our leadership said what they, don't do that. And so people got locked into that vote. And then by the time they realized, no, this is stupid, they were already locked in statements in the media. And I sat down next to Santos right before the vote happened. And I said, because, he's still a human being, right? And I said, look.
A weird one, but, that's okay.
He's funny.
Yeah.
He's very personable. And frankly, he had a very conservative voting record.
He had, if we understand correctly, he had like one of the better voting records for conservatives in the Congress.
And especially for New York. And I sat down next to him. I said, listen, I don't know what you did before you got here. That's none of my business. That's between you and your voters and a court of law. I said, but all of my interactions with you show me that you're a decent, competent, capable man, and you're going to go on to do good things, I think. So don't get depressed today. Because, I was worried about, can you imagine you're that guy and you rose to that level and then you just get kicked out one day? What do you do the next day? I was worried he might hurt himself. So
and you turned down the brightness on your debt clock to make sure there was no other reasons to be depressed.
He actually loved my debt clock.
Are you friends with any of the guys who voted to out him?
Friends? Can we define? This is what is.
Mike Johnson
everybody
voted no.
He voted not to evict him, but he didn't sort of get out in front of this and stop it before it happened.
So, Andy Barr, you know him?
I do.
I hope he loses. How about Ken Buck? Oh, I really hope he loses. Dan Crenshaw. I hope he loses.
You're naming people who voted to
remove
throw him out.
Santos. And I will stress this too. I love making this point because people will message me all the time being like, Tim, if you're mean to these people, they won't come on your show. And I'm like, oh boy. I will make a video where I name every single member of Congress, the Republicans, because Democrats I get, who voted. And no, I'm going to give a special shout out to the Democrats. Robert C. Scott and Nikema Williams, Virginia and Georgia, voted no.
What do they have in their closet?
I don't. Maybe they're saying something like, "Look, I don't like Santos at all. We don't care for him, but this is a bad precedent." I got no idea.
Right?
They voted no.
No. That's a good point.
Yeah,
it is a horrible precedent. He, as you pointed out, he was indicted for some stuff, but he wasn't convicted. So now you're going to get. We've lowered the bar so low that
my best case argument for compromise is. If someone is charged with a crime, at most what we do is they'll be given a bail opportunity, and if no bail, they go to jail until their trial is resolved. And that means innocent people spend time behind bars. I am not a fan of that. It's a difficult position to navigate, but I would err towards we should give people bond. I would prefer house arrest. It would alleviate the prison systems, and then innocent people don't suffer. Still, there's a challenge, right? So if they came and said, okay, we're not going to expel him, but we're going to suspend his committees or something until the resolution of these criminal indictments, I'd say, I don't like it, but I get it. He's been charged with the crime, same for Menendez or whatever. Instead, they were like, no, we're going to remove the guy. So, the rage within me, you know what it is? It's just, I'm so sick of the incompetence, disorganization, and failure to do anything that I really just want to see every single incumbent save like 15 people. There's only a couple Democrats that I'd say, okay, they can get reelected. I don't like them, but we're allowed to disagree. Like, I can't even remember the guy's name. Who's the guy that we like who's a Democrat? He's in California. Do you know what I'm talking about?
California?
Yep. California guy. I can't remember his name. I'll find it in a second. But there's only like a small handful of Republicans I'd say should stay, and each and every one of them got to get voted out. We got to do something because... if the issue with Santos is that they're waiting for leadership to figure out what is the principled thing to do or the long-term benefit, and they don't know, that's bad leadership.
Listen, let me tell you what the bar is on the Democrat side. There was a federal judge who took a bribe, and on the day that the person was supposed to testify against him, the guy decided not to testify, but it was so obvious that this federal judge took the bribe that Congress impeached him. And the vote wasn't even close. It was like all but 2 or 3 senators. It was almost the entire House. His name's Alcee Hastings. What does he do? He turns around and runs for Congress, gets elected, and served for over a decade. I think he served, for nearly 20 years. I've overlapped with him. And you try to be nice. Every time you're talking to him, you're like, you're the guy who got impeached by this very body for taking a bribe as a federal judge. And now you're here and you keep getting reelected.
He's like, hey guys, what's up?
Yeah, right.
Happy to be here with you.
Was he convicted after the impeachment?
In the Senate, the Senate convicted. So the House impeached, the Senate convicted. He didn't do any jail time or anything.
And there's no disqualification to run for Congress being convicted of taking a bribe.
But
as a federal judge?
you could be impeached and then turn around and run for Congress.
So it was Ro Khanna, who we often find there are news stories where we're like, okay, I like that. Okay,
yes, Ro's a decent guy and he's good on privacy, First Amendment, war, anti-war.
However, he did vote to oust Santos, so I don't know if I can forgive that. He's got to go. You got to vote them all out. In fact, I mean, I got to be honest. Like, if they're a Democrat, you should vote them out.
Yep.
That's the obvious thing. So I don't know if that needs to be said. I can respect and like that he's done some certain things. And even with that being said, Ilhan Omar's had, broken clock is right twice a day. Rashida Tlaib as well. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's the one who started the whole January 6th was an inside job thing. And so I have tremendous respect for her coming out, standing up on camera and saying police officers were helping the J6ers. And I'm like, I'm glad you said that.
Yes, welcome to our team.
Yeah. The thing about voting them out and expecting it to get better, I think, is that, and sometimes that can happen, but a lot of people are driven by emotion. Maybe more now than normally. Maybe they're heightened because of the mass media manipulation.
No, you're right. But if there is any member of Congress who has the engineering and scientific know-how to create a cloning machine and then clone himself and then take over Congress, it would be.
We were talking
Massie.
before
435 Thomas Massies. Can you do it?
We were talking about a direct representative democracy in that the people would be voting. So for the George Santos expulsion, it would be like this 750,000 people would vote yes or no, and then whatever the majority is would go to their smart contract, yes or no. And so there would be the people voting through proxy for these decisions instead of like this little cabal of like 200 people that they all know each other and have emotions and probably couldn't stand the guy.
But hold on, come on. If you put it up to a public vote, Santos is out.
I don't think so. Because I didn't even know who he was before that.
I mean, what would likely happen is 3% of the population would show up to vote on it, and they would all be activists. You're not going to mobilize conservatives for a special election. It doesn't happen.
You could. We could start doing that because they're activists in Congress.
No, look.
Every one of them. I mean, maybe not every one of them.
We talked about this. This came up before the show started, and Ian has mentioned this before about the people voting on bills and stuff. And I pointed out this would create a bias towards people without jobs, because they have more access, they have more time to actually go out and participate in these kinds of votes, where people with jobs would be like, I'm working today, I can't.
You can let them do it online. That was my vision, is that it happens online.
Can I just ask, when you're in Congress and the party is split over an issue, like you voted against, I think HR 2, it was one of the immigration bills that came through this year, and there were like things to end birthright or stuff like that. Like, what is the culture that you guys have? Because that was pretty unpopular, but you obviously have your own system of values that you were voting for.
So the problem with HR 2 is it had E-Verify in it.
Well, so what is HR 2?
It's a landmark immigration bill. Republicans, anything HR less than 10 is a big deal. I used to have a rule: I never vote for HR less than 10 because it's usually some messaging bill or the lobbyists had paid to get an HR that was a single digit. When I found out, if I was the very first person on the very first minute, the very first day of Congress, and I introduced a bill and it was HR 11, I was like, how did they do that? Well, I'm not voting for anything less than 10. But it's changed. We've got some good bills. Every part of HR 2 was great except for E-Verify.
And your objection to E-Verify is?
Oh my gosh. It's just another layer of government to track you. It will not be used to end illegal immigration. It may, and some states have it. It's basically just raise the price of a fake ID. And in the meantime, people think, oh, this gets applied to illegal aliens. No, it's applied to every American who tries to get a job. You are going to get E-Verified. Now, remember what they did with OSHA. They use every government program they have to implement this communist future dystopia, okay? Like they were going to use OSHA. First, OSHA was saying an employer can't force an employee to get a vaccine, but then OSHA flipped and said every company over a certain size, we're going to use this bureaucracy to enforce the vaccine mandate. E-Verify would become V-Verify. So you would have to get a vaccine to get employed, and they would have the most efficient way to keep you from getting a job, which is called E-Verify.
So when you voted against it, I mean, how did your Republican colleagues respond to this? Because this idea that like there are always going to be people who vote against bills that we feel strongly about, and we have to understand their justification. I mean, I don't know that I would always want every representative to vote exactly the same on every bill. That seems like sort of the nature of the party.
There was something very swampy that happened because I wasn't the only person opposed to E-Verify. So what they did is they gave a carve out so that E-Verify wouldn't apply to ag workers.
Which is kind of the problem.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Everything is so stupid,
isn't it? And so then all the people who were with me trying to get E-Verify out of an otherwise great bill, they gave up and they got the thing they wanted, which is free, you know, the ag part of it. And the unions were okay with it because it still applied to anybody that was in a union that, you know, that would threaten a union job. You know, ag workers aren't unionized. So anyways, it was really swampy the way they did this carve out after the bill had come out of committee. But nobody was mad at me because honestly, they knew I was doing it on principle. And also, I think a lot of them knew I was right, but they weren't going to take that stand.
You know, and I'm thinking about, you know, as I asked earlier, like, why can't the Republicans get anything done? And I envision these fiery speeches that, you know, you have given, or I've seen like Rand Paul give, and it's like they fall on deaf ears very often because, you know, people just don't care. And then part of me thinks that there is no solution. And so I immediately just imagined, like, what would I do if I was in Congress? And I'll tell you what I'd do. I would show up on the first day with 2 gallons of whole milk and I would dump it on the floor and then I would tell them to expel me and I'd leave. Because I don't know that there is anything else you can do or anything you can do at all.
Well, so support my move for the direct republic. If you don't think this is getting done, we need something new.
I disagree with your idea as well. I don't think that's a solution either.
Let me tell you why Republicans are horrible on the budget and spending. So right now, you would think, you know, with the debt and accelerating and everything in such a bad condition right now that Republicans would get serious about spending. But here's the problem. We could limit the growth of government. We could even influence policy by putting riders on the budget. But there are about 40 Republicans who they will slit their own wrists before they allow us not to spend more money on the military. Like their whole goal is to increase military spending.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of these guys come from military districts where a lot of the funding is from, say, a military base or some kind of contracting job.
I would say so, but I don't know.
I'm not justifying it. I'm saying like they're going to be like, look, if we don't get the funding, this company shuts down. I lose all my district loses jobs.
Yeah, I don't know how they get to where they get to, but they get there, and they will not accept any budget that doesn't spend another additional $50 billion this year on the military than it spent last year, which means if there's some deal to cut everything 1%, there's no way in hell they'll go for it.
Have you considered being evil to get what you want?
Abandoning your principles and just taking on a Machiavellian life.
So listen, I
like the leftist
like
approach
what level of evil?
Like why can't
I'm a reasonable guy.
Anna Claire has a point.
Wait, okay, I got a question.
13% evil.
How come when the Republicans win the House and we know the omnibus is coming, you don't just like take a single sheet of paper that says on this date, as you've done, the Department of Education will cease, and just slide it right in the middle of that 5,000 tall stack of paper on that Red Ryder wagon.
I did something like that.
Red Flyer.
Let me tell you what I did this summer, and a lot of people didn't pay attention, but now they're panicking in Washington D.C. because of this.
I love the way this sounds already. Yeah. Let's go.
Okay, this summer they were so desperate to get the debt limit raised, and I was on the Rules Committee. I said that if you put in a provision that says if we're still doing CRs by April 30th, everything gets cut 1%. Put that in the law. Get Joe Biden to sign it. Get Chuck Schumer to sign off on it.
And they did?
They did. It's in the law. And on April 30th, if they do a CR, by the way, this is the biggest leverage the speaker has right now. He could just, I know everybody hates CRs. I've never voted for a CR.
And that is a continuing resolution.
Yeah, it's just
to keep the government
funded at last year's levels.
Yeah.
It's just a cut, copy, paste. Take that whole spreadsheet from last year and put it in this year. Okay. And they've been doing that. They've done 3 or 4 CRs to get to where we are right now because the spending was due on October 1st of last year. But if they go past April 30th, the Massie provision cuts everything 1%, and Joe Biden signed it into law.
Did they not notice, or what was it?
He's a big fan of Thomas Massie. He always has been.
Back in July, next year was so far away. They just figured we'll figure out some other way to screw the American public when we get to that bridge.
So how about
it's just so far away? Who cares?
So how about you say then in 10 years, on December 31st, 2034. The Department of Education will cease operations. It's 10 years later. You can always change it, right?
Oh, by the way, I forced a vote. I think a lot of people miss this. Jimmy Carter set up the Department of Education in 1979. It was a re-election ploy, and it didn't work.
It was a re-election ploy?
Yes. Can you imagine that? And it didn't work, but we got stuck with the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've never, and Reagan campaigned on getting rid of it. Other people campaigned on getting rid of it. Nobody's ever had a vote on it, but I was able to force a vote on whether we should get rid of the Department of Education this summer. You should go look up this one, too. This is a good litmus test. And here's what it was. It was like H.R. 5. I mean, one of these HRs. Okay, I don't remember what the bill was, but here it was one of the 10 signature bills that Kevin McCarthy wanted to pass. He had campaigned on it. He said, we're going to force every school to publish their curriculum.
Yes.
And every library, local library, at a school to put out the list of library books. And I said, you know what? That's a great idea. Every state should pass that law, but we have no business doing that at the federal level. Like, what authority? By the way, I do have the bill to get rid of the Department of Education. And there's only one tool that the federal government has to enforce what they wanted to do, and that was the Department of Education.
Okay, so now
it was H.R. 5. Yes, thank you for looking this up. So H.R. 5, Parents' Bill of Rights Act. Okay, sounds great. And I told the speaker, there's no way I could vote for that bill because you are giving more power to, now, kind of power I would like and you might like, but ultimately you're giving more power for the federal government via the Department of Education to tell states and local school boards what to do. I have a problem with this. And so McCarthy said, is there any way you could vote for this? And I thought for about a second. I said, there's one way I could vote for it. He said, what's that? I said, you let me insert an amendment vote on whether this department should even exist at all. For the first time since Jimmy Carter, you let me have a vote on the floor of the House on whether to eliminate the Department of Education or not. And he said, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So, and I agreed to vote.
Well, I can see why you liked McCarthy then.
Well, you could deal with him, right? He was in that moment, he was reasonable. He said, what do you need? I said, I need a vote on eliminating the Department of Education. We got 160 roughly votes from Republicans to end the federal Department of Education.
Wow.
And Kevin McCarthy himself voted to end the federal Department of Education.
That's not bad. So I imagine you're a chess player, right?
Not really.
Not really? You ever played Connect 4?
I have played that, yes.
All right. So like in Connect 4, what you're really trying to do is create a circumstance in which no matter what move your opponent makes, it allows you to Connect 4.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like if they try and block you here, then you go here. And can you do that with legislation, right? So what I mean is instead of just coming out right with a bill and saying the Department of Education will cease or like the Federal Reserve will be audited, what you do is you put pieces of it in various places that all start triggering one at a time. And then eventually some like member of Congress wearing like an Indiana Jones hat running through, piecing together all the bills like, my God, sticks them together. And it's like, this abolishes the Federal Reserve.
I think you can do that. And that would be like an emergent phenomenon of intelligence.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.